Some of you might think I'm going to start this video with something like, I didn't like Wednesday. I loved it. That is not the case. So I'm like vaguely familiar with the Addams Family. My family used to own the show from the 60s, and I watched that as a kid. Though, granted, I don't remember a ton of things. But, I kind of remember like the key, sort of plot and stuff, and, how the family interacted. I know I liked Cousin It a lot. I thought he was funny, just like the whole blob of hair. Anyway, I liked him. So a few months ago, I started getting trailers for Wednesday. I think I got it as an ad a couple times on YouTube. And, I saw it and I was like, oh, well, that looks like it could be interesting. Maybe if I have time, I'll watch it. We'll see what happens. But, like, it was on my radar, but I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I need to watch that. And then the show came out, and, my roommate was watching it. I had a friend telling me how much she loved it. YouTubers I liked were posting about, like, it was all over my Instagram feed. It was just everywhere. And I was so shocked because I just did not think it was going to be like that big of a show. And it's like one of Netflix's biggest shows now. And so I was like, okay, dang, well, now I gotta watch it. I finished finals, and then over Christmas break, I finally sat down and watched it. And I had some thoughts. Before we dive into the more negative things, because there's a lot more negative things, let's talk about the stuff I did like about the show. First off, being Jenna Ortega, and just in general. Like, I think she really is the thing carrying the show and is what's making it as amazing as so many people say it is. Like, she just does such a good job in this performance, and I really think she just brings this character to life in a way that hardly any other actor could. I think if it weren't for her, I think the show would have done a lot worse. The other thing I liked is Wednesday is herself as a character. She's really interesting to follow as she kind of tries to put this mystery together and figure out what's going on around her school. I honestly think she's really just the best character out of the entire show, which is a good thing because it is her show. And the other thing is the show is very easy to binge. As I was watching it, I found myself sitting down, and even if an episode wasn't my favorite or there are parts of it that I didn't love, I'd be like, well, I gotta watch the next episode. I gotta know what happens. And so I find myself binging like several episodes at a time, and I've heard people just sitting down and watching like the entire show in one day. And I definitely think that speaks to something good. Like, that means you are leaving the audience wanting more. Usually that means pacing is pretty good. And especially for like, a show on Netflix where all the episodes are released at once, bingeability is a thing that you want. So I think that was well done. Now let's move on to the things I didn't like. I'm not going to try and tiptoe around spoilers. If you want to watch the show and you haven't yet, just click off. So what went wrong? A lot, in my opinion. And I don't think it's anything like super terrible, but I think a lot of like little things just kind of added up and left me, instead of feeling like, oh my gosh, that was a great show, it left me feeling more like, oh, I guess that happened. It just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Now, I'll be honest, I think part of the reason I didn't like it as much was simply my expectations. Maybe I'm just remembering wrong, but the way I always understood the Addams Family was the family was weird, but everyone else was normal, and so that's kind of what I expected going into this show. But then you've got like this whole like normies versus outcasts conflict. Wednesday is going to this school full of like werewolves and vampires, and that was just having supernatural creatures in this at all seemed very weird. It's weird because like I knew Wednesday was gonna have visions, which I actually thought that was kind of cool. It seemed a lot less cool when you have people around her that are sirens and werewolves and all other sorts of supernatural creatures. Part of that may just be because that's not what I was expecting, which, like, if that's the case, then, like, that's my fault, but felt less like, oh, here's a spin-off series about Wednesday Addams, and more like, here's this supernatural world that we created, and then we plopped the Addams Family in it for IP success. Like, that one could just be entirely on me. I don't know how other people felt about that. The other thing that kind of bugged me was some of the tropes they used, especially with like Wednesday and her mom. Because throughout like most of the show, you have this whole tension of like my mother wants all these things from me, but I will never be her, except more deadpan and monotone. But you get the idea. Like, yeah, that they use like the whole trope of like my parents have these dreams for me, but they're not my dreams. And that's just it's so out of place for the Addams Family. Like, aren't they supposed to be, like, very, like, isn't their whole point that they're very supportive of each other? Like, Morticia's a pretty loving mother. Like, she'd support Wednesday doing whatever. And I could see, like, Wednesday having some apprehensions about going to Nevermore. But I don't think they needed to add the whole, well, Morticia was this amazing alumni I don't know, it just, Wednesday and Morticia's relationship was very strained, and I just don't think it needed to be or that it should have been, and that kind of bugged me. The other thing is that there's an episode, I believe it's episode 5, basically it's Parents' Weekend, so Wednesday's family comes up to Nevermore, and so we get like an episode with them as a family, and that was my favorite episode of the show because I think the Addams family does work best as a family, and it's not that like Wednesday on her own isn't interesting, because she definitely is. It was a lot more interesting seeing the family interacting. The other thing with that episode, okay, so basically, if you haven't watched it, the whole point of the episode is Wednesday's dad, Gomez, gets arrested for the murder of this guy. Like, that happened when him and Morticia were in high school. The whole thing is that, like, he was seen with a sword as this guy, like, fell off this, I don't even know what to call it, construction board. Gomez was seen with a sword as this guy died. In reality, the guy that died had been stalking Morticia, and in self-defense and to save Gomez, she stabbed him, and then Gomez took the fall for her. And back in the day, Gomez never got arrested because there just wasn't evidence or something like that. I don't quite remember, but something along those lines. You know, when everything starts to happen and Wednesday finds out that Gomez is getting arrested, she's like really shocked. Here's the thing, is the way I took it is that she didn't want her dad to go to jail. And I think part of the reason I took it like that is because there's a scene with her and Pugsley, her brother, by this like pond where they're talking, and Pugsley's like, well, I don't want dad to go to jail, and she's like, he's not, we're gonna figure it out. So that's how I took it, but more people took it as Wednesday was mad that her dad murdered someone, which is very out of character for like their family, because their family is like obsessed with like death and the macabre, like that's like their whole shtick. If that is what the director intended, that's dumb. And like that's not how I took it, but that's how a lot of people seem to interpret that episode, and I can definitely see why they get that. And if that's the case, then that's stupid. Not the people interpreting like that, like if that's how it's supposed to be interpreted. Because Wednesday casually makes jokes about murder and like other things like that all the time. Oh, but when her dad murders someone, it's like suddenly not okay? Like it just doesn't make sense. And in general, I feel like there's just a bit of character assassination when it comes to the Addams family. Like nothing major, but just some things like that where it's like, I don't think you quite understood what this was supposed to be about. Next up, the dialogue. The dialogue in this show is a lot. I think Wednesday's dialogue in general is pretty good and pretty solid. Like, I think it fits well with her character. But some of the side characters really just feel like, oh, this was a 40-year-old trying to write a teenager and they failed. I've seen people call this show The Addams Family Meets Riverdale, and I can't say I disagree. Because some of the dialogue especially really does feel like Riverdale a little bit, and it's kind of terrible. I think Enid in general gets the worst dialogue lines, especially anytime she mentions social media, and oh my gosh, this is a problem I have with a lot of teen shows, where they put slang and like social media references into shows to try and make it seem more relevant and more like hip with the kids. But the problem is those things are going to go out of fashion really quickly, especially in the age of social media where trends are in and out within like a matter of weeks, you know? Like you watch shows from like less than a decade ago and they're talking about Facebook and Vine, and you hear that and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so old. Even though like in the grand scheme of things it's really not. And so using like things like that and slang from like nowadays, it's just gonna date it in the long run in like the worst way possible, you know? I don't remember all of them, but like there's lines where Enid's like, oh my gosh, you need to get on like Snapchat and Insta and I don't remember, I think and TikTok, and it's like, shut up. If the girl doesn't want social media, don't make her. Also, this is really cringy. And this is no offense to like Enid's actress, because I think she does a good job with the character. It's just the character herself is sometimes, and the writing for the character is sometimes a little eh. And I think there's a couple other lines with some of the other teenagers that I'm like, ooh, this is awkward. Well, that leads us to our next point. It's like, what about all the other characters? And in general, like, they're okay. Some of them I think are unnecessary, and or I don't think we're given enough screen time in order to be good. I think Bianca was kind of interesting, but I don't think we got enough time with her in order to actually be interesting. Ajax is just kind of pointless. He doesn't need to be there. He's just there to be a love interest for Enid, but he barely even gets any screen time. Also, the whole thing of like, oh, because he's got like snakes on his head, he's like the Medusa kind of thing, right? And so there's a part where he like accidentally turns himself to stone, and I saw that clip out of context, and I was like, oh, that's like really interesting. Like now he's like basically dead. And then I watched the show, and they're like, oh, it was just temporary, and then he's like back in the next scene, and I was like, that's a lot less interesting. Who else? What other characters are there? Eugene is fine. I like him. He's a just socially awkward nerd. The way he hits on girls is kind of uncomfy, but in general, like he's a fine character. And I like the scenes with like, where Wednesday visits him in the hospital and like shows a little bit of her humanity. I really liked that. Principal Weems was good. I liked her as a character. Like she was really fascinating. The one lady played by Christina Ricci. When the show came out, I remember there was all this Twitter discourse of like, I can't believe you guys didn't realize that Christina Ricci is the girl that played Wednesday in the 90s movies, and she's the lady who plays, I can't remember what her name is, hold up. Marilyn Thornhill. The girl that played Wednesday in the 90s is the lady that plays Thornhill in Wednesday, and I'm like, how would they have known? Like, I'll have to put up some pictures, but like, here's what she looks like in Wednesday, and here's what she looks like in the Addams Family in the 90s. Like, they look nothing alike. Kind of like you can see the resemblance in their face, like they're the same person, but if you didn't know, then obviously you wouldn't know. Like,
I just realized that I never actually gave my thoughts about the character, so here's my thoughts. She's fine. That's about it. Like, she's a fine character, but I don't have much to say about her.
Anyway, and then the other two characters are Xavier and Tyler. Oh, those two. This kind of leads me into my next point about the love triangle. But I guess first let's talk about their characters in general. So, Tyler in general was like a pretty good character, although someone did bring up that he kind of has like a radio rebel face that he always makes, and I definitely think that's true. When he was introduced, he was like a sweet guy, very nice to Wednesday, even though she's like kind of threatening him most of the time. The scene where they like go and watch Legally Blonde in the crypt, I think, is really cute and fun. In general, he was like a pretty good character up until the end, which, if you watch the show, you know. And then Xavier was kind of annoying the entire time. I didn't like Xavier. He just was like this brooding, angsty kid, but I don't know. And I like angst, but I felt like you have to be careful when you're writing angst, because there's a fine line between it being like, oh, I feel for you emotionally and I understand, and I like your, I don't want to say broodingness, but like, that kind of like, it's like, oh, this is interesting and intriguing how you're dealing with all this. And then there's also, on the other side of that, being annoying. And Xavier crossed into the being annoying a lot more. In general, though, like, these two characters just seemed to lack logic, especially when it came to Wednesday. If you haven't watched the show, there is a love triangle with Wednesday, Tyler, and Xavier, where, like, both of them like her. And I don't get it. There's like this one reel I saw around Instagram a lot that's like, of it, and it's a clip from the TV show where Tyler's like, Wednesday, you're giving me all these mixed signals. And it's like the signals, and it's just her staring deadpan at.
Call me crazy, Wednesday, but you keep giving me these signals.
I 100% agree with that. Like, there was no reason for there to be a love triangle in this show. In fact, honestly, I don't think Wednesday should have had a love interest at all. And I don't know if that's controversial or not, but I don't think she should have. At least not this season, you know? Oh, it just drove me crazy. Out of the two, I definitely rooted for Tyler more. Xavier is the bad boy, I guess, in this situation. And I tend to root against the bad boys, because typically they're just worse for the main character, like, you know? And the love triangle in general just really bothered me, because in general I hate love triangles, I think they're dumb. But also just, like, both of these characters were getting so mad at Wednesday that she, like, wasn't reciprocating, even though she told them time and time again, like, I don't have friends, I don't make friends, I don't want to make friends, let alone, like, be in a relationship. Like, that is clearly not something that she wants. And so you getting mad at her that she's not reciprocating your feelings is stupid, like. And the other thing was, like, Xavier's character in general. So throughout the show, there's this monster, we later learn it's called a Hyde, that's been, like, attacking a bunch of people. A lot of the show is Wednesday trying to find out who this monster is and why it's attacking everyone. And she suspects that it's Xavier. There's this scene where he's like, I can't believe you would suspect me. That's so terrible. Like, I can't believe it. Now everyone thinks I'm a monster. And he, like, gets all mad at her. And it's like, you're so suspicious, though. Like, anytime it attacks, you show up in the exact same place like 2 minutes later. What do you think she's gonna think? Like, that is so suspicious. And like, it ends up not being Xavier. I mean, I already gave a spoiler warning, but spoiler warning again, it's actually Tyler. Which, like, was a little disappointing because I definitely liked him better, but obviously if you're attacking a bunch of people, then, like, not great. Although, again, I would have just preferred if Wednesday didn't have any love interests, but that's, I don't know if that's a hot take or not. And, you know, regarding, like, the reveal of Tyler as the Hyde, like, I'd kind of suspected it was him, not even, like, for any real reason. It was just, like, well, it's not gonna be Xavier, because she suspects him, so he's probably just gonna be the red herring. Like, you know, that would just be too easy. And just because of where Tyler was in the plot, like, I didn't have any real concrete reasoning. It was just more like, here's how I know crime dramas and mysteries work. So if it's not gonna be Xavier because that's too easy. So it's gotta be Tyler. Like, who else, you know? He's just in a perfect position in the plot for it to be him, and it was. So you know, the reveal didn't super surprise me because of that. I don't think it was bad. I'm still a little confused on Tyler's motives a little bit. The other spoiler is that the Thornhill lady mentioned before, that's played by Christina Ricci, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, she is actually this lady named Laurel Gates who's like super against outcasts, and so she like wants to kill all of them or something like that. And so she like weaponized Tyler or something like that. Sorry, it's been a while since I've watched the show. It's been a few weeks. And so I'm kind of pulling things from my memory. And so if I get anything wrong, I'm so sorry. Most people probably aren't watching at this point anyway. But anyways, all that being said, like if you don't have a show to watch, like I do recommend Wednesday. Like it's a fine show and you might like it a lot better than I do because clearly a lot of people do. I think there's just a lot of little problems throughout the show that kind of left me feeling meh as far as a viewing experience instead of like, oh, this was really good, you know? And I think if there's a bit more care done to the characters and dialogue, and they get rid of the freaking love triangle in like the next season, I think that'll be good. And I think it will be a really good show. But I think that's all for me. I'm trying to get videos up when I can, but again, college, so I'll do my best. Thanks for watching if you've made it this far, and have a good day. Oh, also, Thing is literally the best. He's just the best. I love him. That's it. But then, like, it seemed a lot less cool when you've got people around her that are werewolves and Whoa, I can't. My speech impediment is coming out. Oh my gosh, Xavier and Tyler. Actually, we're not gonna talk about them yet. Also, I remember, like, when the show came out, there was all this, like, Twitter discourse of, like, I can't believe you... Alive. I need to make this fast before my computer dies.